That weed you've been pulling out of your garden could actually be food. It's called purslane, and it grows in gardens, cracks in driveways, along paths, and in places where most vegetables would struggle. It looks ordinary, but this little plant has been eaten for generations, is surprisingly nutritious, and can be used in salads, soups, stews, and even pickles. There's just one problem. Purslane has a look-alike called SPURGE, and you need to know the difference before eating any wild plant. So let's take a closer look. What does purslane look like? Purslane, or Portulaca oleracea, is a low-growing plant that spreads along the ground. Its stems are thick, smooth, and succulent. They can often have a reddish or purplish color. The leaves are small, rounded, and noticeably fleshy. They almost look like tiny green paddles. When the plant flowers, you'll usually see small yellow flowers appearing in sunny conditions. Those thick stems and juicy leaves are two of the easiest things to notice. And that's important because the plant we're trying not to confuse it with doesn't have the same look. Purslane versus SPURGE. SPURGE can grow in many of the same places as purslane. So don't simply pick a plant because it looks close enough. Look carefully. Purslane has thick, succulent stems. SPURGE generally has thinner, less fleshy stems. Purslane leaves are thick and juicy. SPURGE leaves are usually much thinner. And here's another important difference. When damaged, many SPURGEs release a milky white latex. Purslane does not have that same milky sap. So if you break a plant and see white, milky sap, don't eat it. Stop and identify the plant properly. And don't taste an unknown plant to test it. With wild plants, proper identification comes first. Why does purslane grow everywhere? Once you recognize purslane, you'll probably start seeing it everywhere. And there's a reason. This plant is extremely good at surviving difficult conditions. It can tolerate heat, dry weather, poor soil, gravel, and places where many garden vegetables would struggle. Its thick leaves and stems store water, helping it survive periods of dryness. Purslane is also an annual plant that produces plenty of tiny seeds. That's one reason it seems to return year after year. And if you simply chop it up and leave pieces of the plant on suitable soil, some pieces may continue growing. So if you've ever wondered why purslane seems almost impossible to get rid of, now you know. But can you actually eat it? Yes. Purslane is an edible plant and has been used as food in different cultures for a very long time. It is eaten in parts of the Mediterranean, Middle East, Asia, and Mexico, where it is commonly known as verdolagas. Nutritionally, purslane contains vitamins and minerals, including vitamin C, vitamin A, potassium, and magnesium. It is also notable because it contains alpha-linolenic acid, or YLA, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid. That's one of the reasons purslane has attracted so much attention. But don't think of it as some magical superfood. It's simply an interesting, nutritious leafy vegetable that happens to grow like a weed. What parts can you eat? The tender leaves and young stems are commonly eaten. The flowers can also be used, and the seeds have been used traditionally in some cuisines. Raw purslane is crisp, juicy, and slightly sour. One of the easiest ways to try it is in a simple salad. Combine purslane with tomatoes and cucumber. Then add a little olive oil, lemon, and salt. That's enough. You can also cook it. Purslane wilts quickly, much like spinach. It can be sautéed with garlic, added to eggs, or stirred into soups and stews. There's one unusual thing about its texture. Purslane contains natural mucilage, so when cooked, it can become slightly thick or slippery. Some people don't like that texture. Others actually use it to their advantage, because purslane can help give soups and stews extra body. You can even pickle the thicker stems. There's one important caution. Purslane contains oxalates, compounds that are also found naturally in foods such as spinach. For most people, normal portions aren't necessarily a concern. But if you've been advised by a doctor to follow a low-oxalate diet, or you have a history of certain kidney stones, don't assume purslane is something you should eat freely. Check with a qualified healthcare professional first. And if you're collecting wild purslane, there's another obvious rule. Don't harvest plants from places that may have been sprayed with chemicals. Avoid contaminated areas, heavily treated gardens, and roadsides where you don't know what has been applied to the soil or plants. You can grow it too. Here's the funny part. You don't have to wait for purslane to invade your garden. You can actually grow it deliberately. There are cultivated varieties with larger leaves and different growth habits. Give it suitable soil, sunlight, and water, and it can produce plenty of tender greens. It's basically asking a weed to do what it already knows how to do: grow. So, is that weed worth keeping? If you've correctly identified purslane, you may have been throwing away a perfectly useful edible plant. Remember the basics. Low-growing plant. Thick, succulent stems. Fleshy, rounded leaves. Often reddish stems. Small yellow flowers. And when you're comparing it with a possible spurge, be especially cautious about thin stems and milky sap. Never eat a wild plant based on one characteristic alone. Confirm the identification before consuming it, because the most important lesson here isn't simply that purslane is edible. It's that the garden is full of plants we often ignore because we've decided they're weeds. Sometimes they're weeds, sometimes they're food, and sometimes they look similar enough that you need to know exactly what you're dealing with. So the next time you see purslane spreading across a sunny corner of your garden, don't automatically reach for the hoe. Take a closer look. You may have been pulling dinner out of the ground all along. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more stories about useful plants, forgotten foods, and the surprising things growing around us. And tell me in the comments, have you ever seen purslane growing in your garden, or have you ever heard purslane was edible? Until